All right. Boom. Right? You've been inspired. You have a big idea. Yeah? Yeah. Now what? The idea is really just like that much. And there's this awesome moment right when you have the idea where you feel so full of life. Anything's possible. And then there's this really not so great moment right afterwards where and now what? Right? Because everyone around you is like, you can do it. Just go out there and do it. And it sounds pretty good, but that's actually the 99.9% of the work, is taking those feelings that you have, those ideas that you have, they're in your head, they're not going to let you go, but that doesn't make it easy to go out and do it, especially if it's not making something 10% better, but totally ripping up the old way of doing things and completely remaking it. That's what you're thinking, that's what you're excited about, but that makes it harder. So what I'm going to try to do for you guys is share with you, I have these mantras that help me make it through challenging times and sort of stepping off of various cliffs that it takes in order to start new, hard, weird things. So I'll share with you a few of the mantras that I have that I associate particularly with starting something in particular. And then I'll open it up and we can talk a little bit. I'd like to hear from you concretely the kinds of things that you think would prevent you from actually going and doing the thing that's in your head right now. You tell me, and then we'll try to work up a few more mantras for you. All right? So the first one, I think this all the time. It's really hard to overdo this one. Go big or go home. It's so easy to think that if you play it safe, if you do it a little simpler, a little smaller, you won't scare yourself, you won't scare your friends or your family, you won't scare your investors when you go ask them for money. It's just not true. The world just doesn't work like that. It's counterintuitive, but you can't go too big. You really can't. The bigger you go, the more inspired you will be personally. And trust me, you will need to be inspired to get through the hard times that will hit you. The bigger you go, the more of a cause you can make it for the people who you're going to need to attract. Hey, come with me. We're going to do something and make the world 5% better. You know what? I'll stay in my current job. We're going to make the world 10 times better. We're going to make the world 100 times better. Now you got me. Now it's like I'll ask what I'm getting paid 3 months after I start work, right? That's the feeling that you need to be able to create in people in order for them to join you. So go big or go home. Swim out of your element. That's another one of my favorite ones. I chronically take on tasks that I'm hopelessly unqualified to do, and I do it on purpose. So I know that feeling that you have inside where you're thinking, nanotech, and I know what to do, and then you think, but I don't actually know anything about nanotech. I need my head examined for even considering going and changing an industry I know nothing about. Right? Wrong. Swim out of your element. First of all, a lot of great ideas. You're not going to be smarter than everybody else. So the fact that you're not in nanotech doesn't matter, because if you were in nanotech, you still wouldn't be in the top 10 people in the field of nanotech. So the fact that you aren't the top 10 is irrelevant. If you aren't going to work harder than everybody else, you're probably not going to have more funding than everybody else. Those are not ways you could have won anyway. You can be more bold. You can be more creative. Those things you can actually do, but you don't need to be from their industry in order to have those qualities. And you can transplant your ideas, your expertise, from an area that you are an expert in into a new area. If you're already in an industry, you've already been brainwashed with the rest of the industry into how that industry works. Your chances of breaking that industry and remaking it in a productive way are actually meaningfully lower. If you take ideas, data, inspirations with you into a new industry, You can actually have a perspective that they haven't had. And that you can do. Even if you can't be smarter or better funded or work more hours, you can have a perspective that they don't have because of your naivete in that industry. So swimming out of your element is not a reason not to start. It's not a handicap that you have. You can't use it as an excuse. It's actually your secret weapon. You should look at that as an opportunity to start in a new area. Plus, personally, in any fight, I'd rather be the underdog than the champion. It's like, have you ever, remember in high school when you were like playing against the varsity team and you were junior varsity? That felt awesome because you couldn't lose, right? If you lost, you were supposed to lose. And if you win, then you get bragging rights forever, right? It's the same thing. When you enter a new industry, you have nothing to lose. So speaking of excuses, one of my other favorite ones is no excuses. No victim mentality. The world owes you nothing. The world might come help you, but I wouldn't count on it. And if you start from the feeling that you need the world to participate in order for you to be successful at taking on this new thing that you're considering doing, you're right to be scared. It might. I wouldn't count on it, though. But if you start from the perspective that the world owes you nothing, which it doesn't, and that it is not likely to bring you any particular help, you have nothing to lose. Because really, isn't that for every one of the people you brought onto your team, isn't that how you want them to feel when they report to you? You don't want excuses. That doesn't mean that you can't fail or that they can't ever fail. But right when you're starting, you have nothing to lose, right? When you're a huge company, you can spend 99% of your time worrying how not to mess up the billion-dollar-a-year money hose you've created. But you don't have a billion-dollar-a-year money hose right now. You have nothing. So you can't lose. Spend 99% of your time imagining what would happen if things went well and planning for that. Because there's no downside. It's like a free option on an adventure. Speaking of no excuses, one of my other favorite ones, I think about it as the no jerks policy. Maybe that's not the best phraseology, but it's the way it sticks in my mind. Is you're not hiring people. When you go out, and by the way, you could be starting a business, you can be starting a new organization that isn't even for profit, you could be starting a new product or service within a company that you're already in. Honestly, that one takes more bravery than starting a separate business. I understand it does. Any of these things, if you're going to break the rules, if you're going to start over, if you're going to ask the world to tolerate you or try to force the world to tolerate you while you're seriously changing things, then you're not hiring a team. That's just not what you're doing. You are building an army. And it is going to be unstoppable because of its collective attitude. It's not its experience. It's its attitude. It's the camaraderie they have, the trust level that they have. You have to find people who have this, and you have to create it through leadership and management. But that is most of the challenge. So another reason not to be scared about whatever you're going to go do is, most of you think, yeah, I know, building a team, very important, blah, blah, blah. No, you actually don't. Most of you think you do, but it's actually way harder. Because if I took a poll, most people would be in the 10 or 20% of your time range. Personally, hiring is close to 90% of what's actually important at the beginning of the process. 90. And the other 10% is management and leadership. There's nothing else that matters. Business plans and other things, that'll come later. You'll have to spend time on that. But at the beginning, it's all that matters. And part of the reason that it's all that matters, next mantra, is fail fast. Because this idea that's in your head that you're feeling like, maybe this is it, this could really change the world. It's wrong. I guarantee I could talk you out of your idea in 30 minutes. I guarantee you I could talk you out of your idea in 30 minutes. You should do it anyway. There's probably a piece of deep and important truth in your idea. It's flawed in all kinds of ways, but there's still real truth in it. It's not important that you have the perfect idea in order to start it. What's important is that you have a process for realizing that you're wrong and a team that works with you to realize as fast as is humanly possible the ways in which you're wrong. Throw it out, start over, or course correct. So, like on the elementary school walls, it says, the only real way to fail is not to try. I guess that's true in an elementary school way. But you don't really fail if you try and don't succeed. The real failure, the adult version of failure, which happens, it's just littered out there. It's most of what people spend all of their time on, is mediocre things that they're working on that they don't have the spirit to kill. That's actually real failure. And so if you commit yourself at the beginning to failing fast, to seeing that moment where you say, this was wrong, as a moment of celebration instead of a moment of mourning, not only will you be more successful afterwards, but now all of a sudden, the process of starting seems less scary. You've already decided ahead of time that your idea isn't right, so you don't need to vet your idea that hard. I'm not saying be stupid. It is possible to make a bad bet. But nothing is impossible. And the process of improving your idea and having a team that can do that with you is way more important than the current quality of your idea, because everybody's idea is wrong at the beginning. Everybody's. So you can't count on that one. Here's one. I think of it, I'm sorry for the phraseology of some of these, but they're how they stick in my mind. I have one that I think of as the 6-gun shootout mantra. I was talking to a mentor of mine early on when I was starting out, and I was asking him, what's an entrepreneur? I'm trying to be one, but what do you think an entrepreneur is? And he said, an entrepreneur is someone who goes into a 6-gun shootout with no bullets in their gun and comes out alive having shot a couple people. And I was like, thanks. But it's for years, I thought this was a metaphor for the fact that he knew how to do it and I didn't. And there was some secret sauce that when I was in the club, then they would tell me how to sneak the bullets into the gunfight. That's not what he meant. He actually meant you won't have the resources. You won't have the people. You won't have the money. You won't have any of the things. Count on the fact that you will be at a massive disadvantage. What makes the process of starting great, the reason we admire people who can do it, is because they go in and they figure it out as they go. So you can't use the fact that you don't have bullets as an excuse, because you never have bullets. It's easy if you have the bullets. And honestly, a larger company is probably already doing it if the bullets are that obvious. So you have to be committed to the idea that you can metaphorically go into this 6-gun shootout and somehow find your way through it. And I know how frustrating that is. Once I figured this out, then I went through a several-year period where I had these mentors who are the Bugs Bunny of entrepreneurship, and they walk off the cliff and they don't fall because they're not looking down. It's like cheating. Or they would say things that in my mind sounded like, well, you just get there and then you just start flying. And I would think, well, I know you do it, I've seen you do it, so I can't actually say that you don't do it, but that's not helpful to me. But it's not that they know something that I don't know, except how to do it. And I have a specific mantra that's helped me through that, which maybe will help you too, which is, if you want to know what you're capable of, look backwards, don't look forwards. It's so easy to feel like, I don't know how to do it, so I won't get it done. But that's kind of nonsensical. You've never done this thing before. Of course, you never know how to do the next thing. It would be boring if you already knew how to do it. But look backwards at all the things you personally have accomplished in your life. Imagine going back to the 20-year-old version of yourself and telling them that they had to go do all these things. It would sound like black magic to them, because that person didn't know how to do it. You figured it out as you went. I have a CEO that I'm mentoring, and he called me in a state, this is 2-3 days ago. And he said, oh God, I have this board meeting coming up, and I had all these plans about how I was going to ask the board, he's got an investor who wants to put a couple $1 million in, but the board doesn't want to take incremental dilution, and he was going to like show them all these great new results. And he just felt like, our revenue's kind of been flat for the last couple of months, and I had these results, and now I can't show it to them because they're not as good as I thought they were. I'm so frustrated. I'm no good at this. I said, Dave, you're looking over the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe. You've been the CEO of this business for 22 months. It was already an ongoing business when he became the CEO of it. The revenues of this business have gone up a factor 12 in 22 months. You've taken on one person and diluted the company by 8% and taken up the revenues by a factor 12. Seriously, you're a loser? My God, we can only hope as a board that you'll be such a loser for the next 22 months. Right? But it's easy for us to laugh and see that, but you can see how in the mindset you care about something and you get so focused on the future and what you don't know, but if you look backwards, things look very different. And often that's what helps me to take on a task that I don't know how to do. Because I don't have to prove to myself, I believe, that I know how to do that task. I only have to convince myself that I've historically done a good job of figuring out tasks I didn't know how to do. I'll give you one more, but then maybe we can start to have people, now that you sort of have the idea, you can give me some examples and we can be a little bit more specific together. So, there's a quote which is misascribed to Goethe. It was originally a mountaineer in the first part of the 20th century who wrote a little quote and said that the end of his paragraph was from Goethe. It actually wasn't, but most people now think of it as Goethe's couplet. You've probably, or many of you have probably heard this, which is, whatever you can do or believe you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. So in my mind, this mantra is genius, power, magic. But the genius, the power, and the magic come from the beginning it. It doesn't make a ton of sense, but as long as you're not sure, you're going to get hurt. It's going to be messy. But when you commit, when you metaphorically burn your boats when you get to the other shore, it's amazing how hard the army fights. It's amazing how focused you become on success. If you no longer can conceive of not doing it, if the idea of giving up is just nonsensical to you, then you will do things which otherwise would have taken an enormous amount of energy for you to get yourself to do. And now it's easy to get yourself to do. And your team will feel the same. They will follow your emotional lead. If you feel that way, they will start feeling that way too. And you will only hire people or bring them onto your team if they already have that shining from within them. It's a magic trick that we play on ourselves, but it's one of the most powerful ones we can do. So I can imagine after the things that you've heard recently, the ideas that are in your brain, and there isn't a secret which you don't know, which if Singularity University had only brought the right person up on stage, then they could have told you, here's how it works, here's how you get the investment. I'm actually happy to talk to you about a bunch of those things, but that's not the point. It really isn't. It's about starting it. It's about committing to something because you're passionate and you personally believe in it. And where exactly it goes, hard to say. Oh, I'm going to give you one more. It's too important, which is leave nothing on the field. I used to have this total hang-up when I was till middle of college, where I graded myself on the outcome. And that's not only, it's tough because sometimes you can't control the outcome. There's just a bunch of luck involved in life. But it also paralyzed me because I knew that I couldn't always succeed, partly because of lack of skill and partly because the world is not fully controllable. And I wouldn't start things. I hated that. And I just switched. It's hard to describe exactly why it happened, but I all of a sudden made a deal with myself in the middle of college, which is I'm going to define my success by leaving nothing on the field. If I give 110% of every moment that I'm awake, if I'm that intense, and I hold myself to an incredibly high standard for that, then I totally don't care what happens. What happens, I mean, I care, like I wish it had gone better, but I'm not going to be mad at myself, and I'm not going to have regrets. And all of a sudden, it looked easy to start things. So you don't have to make that deal with yourself, but I would encourage you, if you're considering starting something audacious, to look at what scares you about starting it, and especially to the extent that it's the idea that you would fail. I'd suggest that there's a deal you can make with yourself. If you leave nothing on the field, then you'll have nothing to feel bad about, and you'll never be sorry for trying. So why don't we pass the microphone around? See, for everyone's sake, if you guys can keep them very succinct, not like big, long stories, but really crisp, like, Astro, I can see the rest of it, but how do I get the money? Astro, like, if the team was all standing in front of me and I could just go yes, no, 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 yes, I know how to pick them, but where do I find these people? Like, tell me the specific reason in your heart that feels like is the secret reason why I'm wrong, and you're not going to start it because you know it's harder than I'm making it sound. Yes, please. All right, brownie points. Come on, really?
Astro, right. How do I find good mentors, and how do I convince them to actually mentor me?
Great question. So part of the secret is, I mean, obviously people who are mentors are in demand, and their time is hard to get. So I'm not going to make it sound like it's easy. On the other hand, I will tell you that mentors, this has happened to me personally on a number of occasions, and I bet you if you just go around and ask people who do mentoring of the kind that I do, you'll find that most of them report this, which is that they have on multiple occasions tried to be a mentor to somebody, only to give up on that person, not because they weren't willing to, but because that person wasn't in the mentee mode. So it depends whether you really want a mentor. That being a mentee does not mean doing what your mentor says. Arguably, that's a terrible mentee. But there's some really basic things you have to do in order to inspire your mentor to mentor you. Like, you have to say thank you for their time. It doesn't sound complicated, but you'd be shocked. You have to follow up. Every time they introduce you to somebody, you treat that like a piece of gold. And if every time they introduce you to somebody, you make a point to study that person before you go talk to them, and you make a point to be sufficiently exciting, enjoyable, impressive, whatever it is you need to do, to that person, so that person then calls the mentor back and says, wow, that was awesome. Because you know what the mentor is going to think? Oh, I'll do that again. Not only did that not cost me something, I actually just got brownie points from my network. Whereas if you're rude or lame, then I'm just not going to do it anymore, right? There are just a few not very subtle relationship cycles which are either virtuous or vicious, and you have to make a point to make them virtuous. Now, in terms of actually finding these people, probably the best way to do it is a version of, groping about in the dark, asking your friends, because some of them will have mentors who they feel strongly about. So you'd be surprised. Mentors don't have to be unpaid people. I have had mentors who reported to me. It's possible to have someone who I'm going to hold accountable, I'm going to manage them with respect to many issues, and still feel comfortable letting them mentor me on other ones. I've had my mentor, at least in some areas, for example, be a lawyer. Most lawyers are not a ton of fun to work with, but that is not universally true. You need to interview them. That is a failure of people's imagination and their process, because there are great lawyers out there who know a ton about business. I'm not picking on lawyers, but as an example. And so, are you paying them? Yes. Does that mean they can't be a great mentor? No. So, yes?
Astro, suppose we have a lot of ideas, very bold, very creative, and we can take the risk to do them, but the most challenging part, at least for me, is time management. And a lot of people will tell you that you have a lot of time, and if you make up time, then you can do whatever you want and all that. But practically and realistically, how can we create time, extra time to go for our endeavors?
Extra time. Geez, I don't know. If I could make extra time, I'd be doing that at Google X. That's what I want to be able to put in a bottle. Totally random story. I have my 8 and 10-year-old kids like brainstorming on like crazy inventions, and at some point one of them proposed that we could make a second satellite, a gmoon, and then don't worry, Google's not doing this. And then we would like put advertisements on it, and no one could be angry because we were advertising on our gmoon instead of the normal moon, which was like, okay, whatever. So a 10-year-old idea, and my 8-year-old son said, no, that would be terrible. And I said, why? Thinking he was actually sympathetic about like the eyesore that it would create. And he said, because it would slow down the Earth's rotation and make the days longer. And I thought, wait a second, now there's a business. We could actually finally like sell people more time. That's what everyone wants, more time in the day. There you go. We just need another satellite. I've seen this happen a lot, where people say, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do my day job, but then I'll do this on the side. One time in 50, it works out. So I'm not saying it's 0, but I don't like your odds. This is part of the boldness in the genius, power, and magic, or that is created by the boldness of just committing. Because if you're really committed, and I'm not saying you're not committed, but that act is like just throwing yourself off a cliff. It doesn't make any sense, and it's like if you take any kind of rational perspective, it's just dumb. And yet, that's the magic trick. It's what creates the genius, the power, and the magic. That's the time that's created, is because you just say, I'm not doing all that stuff I used to do. And I'm not saying like walk away from your family, right? Like we all have complex lives, and this is not 24/7. It's okay to have other things that you're already committed to. But this needs to be like your main thing if you expect to create magic. I wouldn't recommend trying it like on the side. Yes?
You mentioned a lot of things that I strongly believe in, conviction and then just bold and be bold and go and all that good stuff. And second, most important thing is to find people. My question is, there are a lot of things that bruise on an idea is the smallest thing, I agree, right? Idea is that, if you have a good idea, so does 1,000 other people have the same idea. Who executes it, correct? How do you find somebody passionate and bold like yourself? Where do you find them? And when you do find them, how do you know they're not puff of smoke? Because there are a lot of, wannabe, and some are real one. So how to differentiate, and especially when you're investing money and betting on that horse, you can't be wrong more than right. So.
Are you talking from the perspective that you're going to be founding this entity,
correct,
or that you're investing in the entity?
Idea, for example, I have something in my mind that I want to execute. I'm not the expert at it, but I know I'm more of an architect of it. I know it can be done.
So you're going to be a founder and you want a co-founder. I'm just trying to understand.
Correct.
Okay, so for the first 2 or 3 people, this is incredibly limiting. I will tell you my mantra. This is hard to execute on, especially at the beginning, but you don't really know people until you've been in a foxhole with them. Like, until things have gotten really bad, you don't actually know what they're made of. And so don't start something really hard unless you've already been in the foxhole with them. I would take someone who in many respects I actually believed was subpar, not just in their expertise, but in other areas. If I believed that in those bad situations, we're still going to have a rapport which is productive. It sounds weird. I think reasonable people could disagree about this, but I believe pretty strongly that it's easy for everyone to get along and be doing fairly good things when things are going well. But you know what? If it was easy, everyone would do it. It's not going to be easy. And if it's not going to be easy, it's those moments where the things get complicated that you most need to be able to be honest and political free with the few people who are the sort of key people around you. And if you have to, go artificially have hard times with these people, that's actually not totally out of the, like doing an Ironman triathlon with somebody so that you just get good and miserable together. It's not the same, but it's a lot better than interviewing them or looking at their resume, because people can get lucky. Yes?
Can you help me quantify that tricky question of how to fail fast? And I'll narrow it down to internet experiences, say a product or a service offered online. Like, what's the traction in terms of usage base and time to run a version before deciding to move next and iterate and optimize?
Sure. So there's no formula for failing fast because there's so many reasons. Even in that you've narrowed it some, there's so many different reasons that you might decide that it's not right. Some of them may be very quantitative and some of them might be very qualitative. You just don't believe in it. Or people are using it for a reason that's pointed away from the way that you want to go. Though, by the way, that's usually exactly what you should follow. But some people are like, I understand that the market is telling me something and I want to ignore it. This is where I want to go. That's fine. So there is not a cookie cutter answer, but I will give two specific suggestions. The first one is if you have a hard time with that process, don't make it a process. Or don't make it a decision. Run champion-challenger experiments. You have two versions at the same time. You randomly expose people to variants on it, and you just see, according to some metrics which you pre-commit, or how you're going to decide, and whichever one wins after a period of time, you just go with that one. Repeat. And so you can always be brewing, actually 3, 4, 10, Facebook, Google runs lots of experiments all the time, little changes in the UI and how ads are served up and all this stuff, and they're very data focused. And this is a way to automate making progress and not getting stuck in some particular place. So that's one way to do it. Slightly more process-oriented still is just have a regular phase on which you change things. Just say, we're going to change things once a month, so that there's no question about whether something's going to stay the same. It doesn't mean you change everything all the time, but if you force a discipline for making non-trivial changes on a regular basis, people are going to fairly naturally hunt out, change things. Sorry, by the way, because what happens is people are not good at changing things, so they keep adding features. Adding features is not failing fast. Adding features is the opposite of failing fast. You have to make someone take a feature away in favor of a new feature. If you do that one thing, all of a sudden you're failing fast. Don't worry about it. People will have like really hard conversations with each other about which feature is the one that they should throw away, and now you're failing fast. Now you're actually talking about, which is the runt of the litter here, right? Yes?
Regarding the hiring issue, well, you have exams and you have interviews in the resume, but what other things you do in order to hire like high performance people?
So if you there's tons of evidence that sitting and talking with somebody, even asking them like, are you smart questions, is basically useless. Which is interesting because mostly that's what happens everywhere. Including, it's no secret, at Google, so I'm not like saying like we've got it perfectly sorted out. Having them do things generally is better. It is hard for large companies to commit that much energy. They get out of the habit, right? But ask them to do something hard, like really hard. Like, here's a piece of code. I'm speccing it for you. You can take 2 weeks if you want. Go write it. Have them actually, like, look, we'll pay you for the next month. We want you to come consult for us. Like, come sit in the team, like, all the time, sign the confidentiality agreements, work. Show us that you rock. So, like, when you say it like that, it all of a sudden doesn't sound quite so daunting anymore. The other thing is, especially early on, doing something outrageous where you need to fail fast, it is adaptability which is at the highest premium. Creativity kind of adaptability, willingness to leave your own ideas at the door or to give them up in favor of a better idea. So put them, who cares that they have a ton of experience in the area in which you need experience? I mean, it matters, but put them in a situation where they're going to be wrong. Artificially create it. And then see what they do. See how willing they are to give up on their idea and go with your idea instead. Find the things that you actually want them to be like, and then however much time it takes to test it, actually test for that thing. Because what happens in a 2-hour interview or a series of 1-hour interviews is you find out who's an extrovert, who has good diction, who dresses the right amount nice but not too nice. These things that are like so not what you actually want to optimize for when they come to work. So. Yes.
So once you've brought in that talent, could you talk a little bit about that 10% of coaching and inspiring, like mantras that you have around that?
Sure. So people are incredibly different about this one. So even more than many of the reasonable people could disagree about some of the mantras I've already given you guys, this one even more so. But I will give you my style, let's call it, in the form of some mantras. So personally, I'm pretty good at managing people, at giving them clear direction and holding them accountable. But there's a limit to how tough I can stand to be with people. I'm just not super conflict oriented. So I tend to find people who are motivated not to disappoint me. Because if I have to pound the table personally, and some people are really good about doing the voice raising kind of thing, and when it gets to fear creation, I think it's just actively negative. But even before that, there is a real sort of hard driving, let's go insanely fast, and failure's unacceptable kind of way of managing. It's very effective. I'm not saying it's not. It's just not me. Right? So when I know that I need to look for people who are very much self-starters and who have high EQ because I need them to be motivated personally to succeed rather than to need fear or some kind of external signal that they're blowing it. Which is no excuse. You still have to give them the signal. You have to give them the I expect you to make the time machine by next Thursday, and then if they don't make the time machine, then you say, hey, where's the time machine? Oh, you said you were going to do it by next Thursday. There was like a breakdown here, but this is my style personally, to say, why do you think that didn't happen? I'm not going to fire you. It's okay for you not to succeed sometimes, but I do want to fine-tune how we interact, because I expect you to get it done most of the time. And if you think that it was unreasonable, that's your job to tell me at the beginning, not at the end. You have to really work this through with people. And in order to do that, they need to be excited to learn. That's actually part of the thing that I do when I'm interviewing, is use situations which will generate learning and see if they're hungry to be wrong, or when they're wrong, if they're more busy trying to cover up the fact that they were wrong, or if they were like, awesome, really? How does that work? That's the person I want to hire, is someone who can't wait to hear how the world actually works, and they've totally lost interest almost immediately in the fact that they just got it wrong, that they're not busy being embarrassed, they're busy learning. Right? Because those people are going to do great. And you need those people in the management moment if you actually want to talk to them like human beings, or what I think of as the sort of optimal way of doing it, where I tell you honestly how I'm feeling and what I need from you, but I also understand that you have a perspective too, and we have to match. I assume most of you are good managers, that you guys, you aren't fresh out of college. It is unbelievably important if you want to be a great manager, you have to manage different people differently. And most people, even relatively senior people, fail to do that, I believe. Leadership by example, it sounds so basic, but I can't tell you the number of CEOs who tell me that their people all leave at 5:30, and then when you ask them what time they leave, they say 5:30. Which is fine, by the way. Another mantra of mine, which is, I'm not a big believer in 80-hour work weeks. I understand some people get a lot done in 80-hour work weeks, but especially for the top few people in an organization, and sometimes even for the makers, it's making 10 great decisions a week. There's a mantra of mine. 10 great decisions a week. That's your job. And if you do that better 30 hours a week than 80 hours a week, my God, spend 30 hours a week at work and spend the rest of the time on yoga and jogging and whatever it takes. Because those 10 decisions are like all these people are going to be running in the direction of your decisions. If they're the wrong decision, even slightly the wrong decisions, if you say one cranky thing to one relatively important person, they will spend half a week like cycling internally on that cranky moment you just had. You have to control that cranky moment. Say it productively. And if you need to work 2 hours less a night to not have that cranky moment, do it. Your company will go faster. Yeah.
Astro, what about those shoes?
I don't know. They're just comfortable for me. These are Vibrams. I don't have any stock in the company, but I will tell you that I now jog in this sort of on your toes kind of way, and it's really meaningfully helped my knees. So I'm a big fan of them.
Just a tiny bit more about the time question from here and here. So you don't work 100 hours a week now.
No.
And
I work more than 40, honestly, so I don't want to
Yeah.
oversell but
yeah.
but I don't work 100, no.
Yeah. So you've got some discipline around how you split up your time.
For sure.
Could you would you just
Sure.
give that to me, please?
Okay. In my particular case, right now is a little bit different. I historically have been a startup CEO for a long time. I ran a series of businesses, and I had one mode. I'm now in a slightly different mode because I'm at a large company. So, for example, I don't spend any time fundraising because Google doesn't need funds. I spend my time in doing somewhat other things like learning the system there. You know, there's like a whole like HR infrastructure which you need to learn in order to be very effective there, and the legal group and things like that. And there's processes. You know, as a startup CEO, you don't like your lawyer, you fire them and you get another one. It doesn't really work the same way in a large company, and you just have to learn. I'd never been in a large company before until about 2 years ago. So I can tell you more about that, but I'm going to actually tell you more. I think what your question is in these times when you're making something from scratch without a net, right? Because I work hard, but I have a net, essentially, right? So I would spend 20% of my time pretty much constantly fundraising. And I only had to make it 20% of my time because it was constant. I see a lot of startup entrepreneurs have this very bursty period, and they think that they're just going to do it and then get back to work, but it doesn't actually happen like that. So another mantra of mine, which is my style for a long time, has been to go to people and say, I don't want your money right now. I'm not ready to take your money, and you wouldn't give it to me anyway. I want to tell you what I'm going to get done in the next 6 months. I'm going to educate you about my industry, and I'll do it for free. What I want is 6 months from now, I want you to let me come back and just tell you how I've done over the last 6 months on those milestones. So you get free consulting, and when I ask you for money, which I'm going to do in like 2 years, then you're not even going to do due diligence because you've been watching me for 2 years, and you'll know that I'm actually honest with you and that I do the things that I say I'm going to do, and I will have built up a kind of credibility and comfort with you that you never possibly could have gotten. And we'll do it with a lot less conflict, and now you don't feel like I'm shystering you because I'm telling you up front I'm not going to ask you for money now, so you can relax as an investor. So that's why I would end up spending about 20% of my time fundraising just sort of constantly. It also made it easier for me to manage my time because if you're going to go for 4 or 5 months doing nothing but fundraising, then the ship has to be able to run without you. And lots of CEOs get into this mode where right after they're done with the fundraising, then they come back and find out the ship doesn't really need them, and in a kind of semi-broken way, it's actually figured out how to get along without them, and they're like trying to figure out what their job should be and pushing people out of the things that they're doing. Like, no, that's mine again. This is not a good plan, in my opinion. I would spend about 10 to maybe 20% of my time networking. Sometimes it looks weird. If I'm going to spend my time talking to you I don't know what I'm going to get out of it. Sometimes I'm just going to be a mensch to you. I believe it's going to come back to me in the next 20 years. My current company may not get it. So you have to get to steady state, but once you do, whatever I'm stealing from this company by networking in the long-term sense, my company is also getting from the networking I did at the previous company. And it's you have to get to steady state before you feel good about that, but I believe in that. And the rest of it, you should spend time deeply understanding each of the things that your group is doing and doing none of them yourself. Do not make the product yourself. Do not be the CFO yourself. You need to know their jobs so you can understand their problems. But as soon as you start doing any of their jobs, they will stop doing their jobs. And you don't have a team. You have a bunch of people who are sucking money out of you, waiting for you to be the team. So I think...
I got one more question.
All right.
So Peter has a mantra, Peter Diamandis, that goes, the day before something is a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. So you're doing moonshots. You probably must see a ton of crazy ideas. How do you discern the crazy ones from the potentially real ones?
Some of it is just gut. There's no good answer. But I will give you a mantra for this, which is not mine. It's actually Steve Jurvetson's. Steve Jurvetson has a rule of thumb, which I think is a good one. His rule of thumb is, if you show an idea to a bunch of experts in the field, and all of them say you're crazy, you're probably just crazy. If more than like 20% of them say it's a good idea, it's so old news. It's just not interesting. The sweet spot is when like 3, 4, 5% of the people you ask say you're not crazy. And you have to believe that they're not crazy in order for this to actually be useful sampling. But that's the great one, because people are uncomfortable. It's counterintuitive to do something. And so a small number, for various reasons, will want to see an agenda, an assumption broken, and they'll feel good about it enough that they can go with you, and then they have the expertise to see the ramifications of the assumption you're planning to break, and that would work. So that's the mantra he proposes, and I think it's a solid one. All right, thank you very much. Good luck on your projects, guys.